Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show law enforcement veteran and the man behind the resilient warrior, Mike Morgan. Now, in this conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from Mike's journey into the world of law enforcement, some notable calls, working with SWAT, his own powerful mental health story, how ayahuasca helped him break through some of his own challenges, how he's using his journey to help other first responders, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of well over 1,100 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Mike Morgan. Enjoy. Well, Mike, I want to start by saying thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Well, I want to thank you very much for having me. It is an honor and a pleasure.
So I know that we're not too far from each other. Where on planet Earth are we finding you this afternoon?
I am in Lake Worth, Florida. So for those of you who are into equestrians, it's just south of Wellington, which is the winter equestrian capital of the world, and just about 45 minutes north of Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
See, Ocala calls itself the horse capital of the world. So have they ever had like a gang war to figure out who's the ultimate horse capital, even though that's excluding all the other countries that probably have more horses?
Exactly. I think it'd be a great show. Let's see if we can pitch it.
Yeah, I'm sure
a lot of money in both places.
Yeah, someone would pick it up. I know they would. All right.
No doubt.
I mean, after all, they were televising cornhole during COVID. So after that, I realized that the bar was so low that any of us could be on television these days.
Brother, there's crazy shows on there's like 19 ESPN channels, but my wife and I will watch them and record these insane subjects, sports that they come up with these days. And I have to send in my stepsons. Pillow fighting. The one the other day was bicycle polo in New York City, and they're televised, which blows me away.
One I saw recently, which was actually quite entertaining, but it was basically dog jumping. So they were on a platform, they jumped into the water, and it's how far can they jump? And I think between that and televising children playing baseball, those are the two that really blow my mind.
Well, I love the Little League World Series, if that's what you're referring to. So I am guilty of watching that every year, and I love watching a dog jump too. Anything with dogs, I'm a dog guy.
All right. Well, very first question then. Let's start at the beginning of your timeline. Tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
Sure. So I was born in North Bellmore, New York, which is a suburb of New York. It's, the western portion of Nassau County. Nassau is broken up into Nassau and Suffolk counties, and I am was on the South Shore. So it was a middle income area. Lower to middle income where I was. I was on the lower income side of the tracks. My father was a fireman for the FDNY, and my mom was a school secretary for the local school district, elementary school district. And I have a younger sibling, sister 2 years younger than myself.
So when you reflect back now, having worn, the law enforcement uniform for your whole career, what were the pros and what were the cons of having a firefighter as a dad?
Well, number one, my father did not want my sister and I to become civil servants. He vowed that she and I would never take a civil servant test. He wanted us to both have white collar jobs. She's a attorney. I graduated college with an accounting degree. So it seemed like his mission was successful. But on the first day of commuting into Manhattan for my new accounting job, I found myself being super flat, just no emotion whatsoever. Got introduced to a bunch of associates and bosses. And about 11 a.m. was given a task. Shortly thereafter, found myself waking up. My head was in my hand, fell asleep at my cubicle, went over, spoke to a guy that seemed really cool. We had hit it off. I said, "You like this stuff, bro?" He's like, "F no, I hate it." I said, "There is no way I'm sitting in a cubicle for the next 30, 35 years of my life, making no difference to anyone or everything, or anyone or anything." And before lunch, decided that that career was out for me. So my dad was not happy about that decision. He definitely tried to influence me greatly on what my career should be. We butted heads quite a bit, and it was not a great relationship, to be honest with you. Never was.
What was it about his experience in uniform you think that deterred him from wanting his children to do the same thing?
He never really got into specifics other than the monetary aspect. He always wanted his kids to do better than he did. He never discussed a job with me. So, obviously there's trauma heaped upon first responders. That was never, a portion of his argument towards me that I should never become that. And I never had any interest in becoming a fireman. Frankly, I never felt the pull of becoming a first responder until that day my first day at that job. And then I really started going deep introspectively thinking about what I would like to do for a career.
I know we're going to talk about obviously your own mental health journey and again the post-traumatic growth, which is so important. But I think what's interesting is a lot of us, when we are at this point now, at this age, the other side of the career, found some tools that are working as far as, moving through some of the dark element. Oh, I just lost you there. That was weird. My screen just timed out. Let me just write that down. It just threw me for a second. Everything went black. Working through our own challenges is then the ability to look back and reflect on our early life. The kind of generational trauma, that's something I talk about a lot these days. And then B, understanding that a lot of us drawn to the uniform professions, there's a lot of us that have had things happen when we were younger that contributed to struggles when we were older. So when you reflect back now with this veteran lens, what were some of the more challenging elements of your childhood?
It's funny. I thought, as probably most of us do, that everything I went through was normal. And I never really reflected back. Periodically, my father and I, as I said, have never had a good relationship. So throughout, there's always been tension. And it was my normality. But when I started my healing journey, I really went back and I started looking very deeply at my childhood and what made me, what made my behaviors that I display, use those behaviors, just my thought process. I really wanted to see like why I do certain things. And I never realized how absolutely critical my father was growing up. I mean, nothing could be done right. He was very mechanical. And I remember when I was young, I wanted to learn how to fix things. But every time I went to help him, it was like screaming curses when you made one little mistake, just belittling and, the language. It's funny, he definitely used, I don't know if I want to say physical violence, but he didn't spare the rod. And that never really bothered me. Even then, looking back now, like I would take a beating rather than the mental abuse that was kind of heaped on me. You're worthless, you're stupid, what the F is wrong with you? It's insane when I think about it, and him speaking to a young child like that. So I've learned to callous up to not feel the pain. And that was a huge thing that I've taken throughout my life. And in some respects, when I became a first responder, it was the greatest thing in the world because you can't absorb all this pain. So I didn't even have to learn how to reflect it or deflect it. I was already calloused up. And that was the way that I wasn't able, I just didn't absorb it. I was already trained, which is not something to brag about. When I look back now, there were so many things that I was so emotionally shut down about, or just emotionally unintelligent. I've gone through this journey over the past year and a half, and I've changed so many things about myself, and I've, hopefully kind of risen above what I was and changed myself as a man, frankly. But and I think I would give my father more credit if he tried to be a hard man as I was a kid, disciplined, he wanted to, have a disciplined child, and several things he wanted to achieve through me or whatever. But it never stopped into adulthood. When you become more like contemporaries, so to speak, you become more, a lot of times you'll develop more of a friendship. Like, it was never there till the day he died. That criticism never ended. And he was just, I never felt he was there to help me. And, unfortunately, that's traumatic. And I never dealt with it. And I didn't realize how many of us in the first responder military careers have suffered that, which a lot of times causes us to go into these professions that we choose.
It's interesting because I think a lot of us, when you actually look back, you're constantly chasing validation. And it's not obviously the reason that you're wearing it. This is subconscious, contributing factor. But whether it's us, and we reach the pinnacles as far as, in my job, firefighter and paramedic and special operations and ranks, if that's something that you've chased, or in your profession, gang unit and SWAT and all these areas. And then they reflect back, but it was never enough. And you ask people that are in the sporting world, they world champion, but it wasn't enough. The millionaires that made all that money, it wasn't enough. And I think that validation is so important, just to be enough through a parent's eyes.
Absolutely. Agree 100%. And I have a funny, ironic story, not comedic. I went into the fire. My father brought me into the firehouse one day. I was probably, I'm going to guess 14, 15, mid-teens. And he introduced me to a firefighter I'd never met. And he tells me, your father talks about you in sports all the time. I was pretty good in all my sports that I played. And I answered him with, me? Talks about me? And he didn't even catch on. And he's like, yeah, he talks about you all the time. And I could never reconcile that. Like, what do you mean he talks about? He never talks about me. And when he does talk about me, I remember him. I had 9 assists one game, and the whole ride home was him screaming at me why I didn't score a goal. That's, how critical he was. And I finally realized, I'm talking to my wife about a year and a half ago, and I kind of bring up that situation. And she said, you know why he was doing that? And I said, no. She's like, he's definitely a narcissist, but that's his way of making himself look better. He's talking about you and bragging about the things that you're accomplishing. He'll never tell you he's proud to give you credit for doing so, but he's using these feats to talk to others to kind of, make himself look better. And I just looked at her and I said, man, I never thought about that. You were 100% correct. Now it makes sense.
Well, have you kind of looked into like his upbringing? Do you know if he was exposed to similar behavior in his family?
Yeah, his parents didn't have a good relationship. They were cold. They were cold towards themselves. They were cold towards others. His mother apparently pitted himself against my uncle a lot growing up. I'm not sure exactly why she was doing that. I think she was trying to get more attention from my father, whatever her logic was. But they were always pitted against each other. It's funny, growing up, my uncle was a great guy, and we'd always go to the house, and my father's demeanor would change immediately when he came in contact with his brother. And it would be one-word answers, cold, dismissive, and I can never understand it. I'm like, I don't understand why you talk to Uncle Jerry like that. And he'd be like, he's an asshole. And I'm like, no, he's not. I don't understand it. And, finally, when I started getting older, I started asking a few more questions to my cousins, and they kind of knew the situation a little bit better, and they told me what was going on. I said, now it makes a little more sense. But he was just a very, very cold guy, and he had no awareness. Sometimes, a lot of healthy people will know when they're speaking to someone, and maybe something they said turned them off. You could just notice immediately, like you just said something and bam, they had that minor reaction, and maybe you'll come back and address it, or maybe you'll just kind of change going forward, whatever narrative you were speaking about. But, I could see him constantly offending people, and he just never picked up on it, or just didn't care enough to change, his thought process.
This is what I think is so exciting, is our generation. I've said this a few times recently. Our generation of first responders, will stay with our professions for the moment. We really are standing on the shoulders of giants. All the pioneers in law enforcement and paramedicine and firefighting, the industries that created the SCBAs and the bunker gear and, the forcible entry tools, in your world, obviously the tactical gear. That's whose shoulders we're standing on. And I think where we have the ability to make a massive difference is now the human in the uniform. That was completely disregarded, over this last few decades. But when we really actually acknowledge the domino effect of all these generations and all these households, as you hear this phrase thrown around all the time, well, the problem is, these homes, they're all fractured these days, and it's single parents. It's like, yeah, but no one's saying, well, why? Why is that? No one dreamed once, of getting married and then becoming divorced and being a single parent, or becoming an addict, or, taking their own life, or living under a bridge. Like, no one dreamed of that. So what is going on? And I think that now we have a generation that are doing the work, that are saying, I'm not going to let that domino fall on my child. And I think that is such a beautiful thing, because it takes courage. It really takes courage to say, I'm going to work on me, and I'm not going to pass what I felt when I was younger through my upbringing onto my children. So I think this is what makes these conversations so powerful, because usually, unless it's an anomaly, and even then, who knows what happened behind closed doors, usually you see the same pattern of behavior with parent, grandparent, great-grandparent. So these conversations are so much more than just, talking about suicide. If we can unpack generational trauma, you're going to impact so many areas, from addiction to obesity and everything else.
Yeah, 100%. We're evolving as a people and a society as time goes on, and we're able to see, stigmas are getting released. We're realizing now that showing emotion is not weakness. I mean, there are so many things that have changed in the last generation. But it's funny you said that. I made a post the other day because I don't want to label who it is, but let's just say there's someone close to me, and their spouse had we were texting about something, and they had mentioned that their spouse curses at the children quite a bit, and it surprised me. I had no idea, and I thought it was a joke at first, so I just confirmed, and this person said yes. I don't even want to say he or she, and I said that's not good, and I asked a few more questions, and I know the person's father, and the father was definitely hard, but wasn't this hard on the child. And so I made a post about speaking the way you speak to your children. And, essentially it was, you tell your kid to shut the fuck up and tell them that they're fucking worthless and they're fucking stupid, they're never going to forget that. So let me tell you now, when you do that for the entirety of their life, I'm 57 years old, and I can tell you pretty much every time my father has said things like that. And I remember hating him when I was young, sitting there telling myself, I hate him. That is the way your children are going to feel. It's generational trauma. It's up to you to break that curse. And understand, maybe you were raised like that. Doesn't give you an excuse. I was raised tough. Doesn't give me an excuse to go around treating people like garbage. And, it is incumbent upon us. If there is a generational trauma, we're the ones that are going to have to be the ones to stop it. I can't speak today. But it's incumbent upon us, 100%. You can't put it on someone else. Look in the mirror and see what you're doing and how you're treating people. Sometimes that mirror is the hardest thing to look into, because what's staring back at you is not pretty. And I've done it myself, and it hasn't been.
I think what's interesting is you find yourself at a crossroads. You can either do the exact same thing that your parents did, or you can say, well, I'm going to do the exact opposite because I know how it made me feel. And I think it's that turn that sends a lot of us into uniform. I want to be there on someone's worst day. I truly do. Whether I'm at work, whether I'm off work, if someone's going to have a crisis, I want to be one of the people there to help, which is such a beautiful calling. It really is. So that mirrors how, we should be in all these other areas too. If you know how it felt to be chastised, and it's kind of the same thing. My grades were never good enough. My dad actually, I was a national martial arts champion. He never saw me fight once my whole really? Childhood. No. And there were other areas too, but what it ended up doing, and this was completely subconsciously, but I remember at 18 years old, watching fathers that, when I was lifeguarding, that took their kids to the pool, and watching them, at the top of the slide, just watching them with, sitting them on their lap and going down the slide. And even then I was like, I want to be a good dad one day. And I'm not saying my dad wasn't a good dad, but there were areas that definitely I wasn't going to copy the same behavior. But this is the superpower that we have. But it's, you've got to identify. I always say it's reasons, not excuses. You're not then going to play a victim because you had a certain childhood. It's not about that. But how can you grow from it until you actually look at it and acknowledge it and say, yeah, this was bad. And I was a victim in this particular situation. I was a child being berated physically. or mentally or whatever it was, I was a victim. You allow yourself to feel that. You give yourself an excuse to get rid of the guilt and the shame, and that's where the healing begins.
Yeah, and that's what I've tried to do over the past year and a half, because I never realized that, to be honest with you. And it's funny, you mentioned before about being in situations where you can help others. I remember, and I hated doing it, but delivering death notifications or going to people's houses when they are. I remember one time we had to deliver a death notification about a 20-year-old who was on spring break to a family. And I always remember leaving there kind of thanking God, like he sent me to do it, because I knew I was the absolute most compassionate guy in the world. Like, I don't look at him, it's 235, tatted up, shaved head, but I always treated people exactly the way I want my family treated in that exact situation. And trust me, it was heartbreaking stuff a lot of the times. And I also would question myself as to why I couldn't be that compassionate all the time, because I wasn't. I was a hardened man, to be honest with you, and I didn't like that about myself. I didn't realize how much so, I guess, until right before I started this healing journey, or maybe into this healing journey. And I didn't realize how much I didn't feel, how much I tried not to feel. I do now. We're going to talk about the whole process, but it's a beautiful thing to feel. But when you start to feel, it's going to bring up a lot of other things too, and get ready for that pain, because it's coming, man. You don't just become this healed individual and everything is put in the rearview mirror. Like, you have to go through, you have to heal. Like you said, you have to give yourself grace, and you have to love yourself first before you could love anyone else in a healthy manner.
Absolutely. Well, kind of going back to the early life for a moment then, you mentioned about playing sports. What sports were you playing through the school years?
I played basketball. My big ones were baseball and hockey. Hockey by far was my biggest. I played through college. I actually played 1 year. John Cooper, the coach of Tampa Bay Lightning, and I were teammates at Hofstra University. So he's a good guy, good hockey player too. But for the most part, hockey was my big sport.
When you reflect back now, what did you take away from those sports that you found as a tool for success in uniform?
I guess number one, the team camaraderie aspect. I always loved being part of a team. I always loved working hard. It's funny, I loved every practice of every sport I've ever played. Like, some people hate it. I loved it. And I think the biggest thing that I loved about policing was that team aspect. I was talking to someone about it yesterday, and they asked what I miss most. I'm like, camaraderie, 100%, without a doubt. I don't know if you feel the same.
Yeah, no, it's true. But again, it's funny because you have this sense when you're in that you're part of this tribe, and then you transition out and you actually realize, okay, within that tribe, there were the people who truly were friends, and there was everyone else who you got on well with, or maybe not so well with, but you worked side by side and you fought fires and did all the things. But what I realize is that camaraderie can absolutely survive outside of uniform too, but you've really got to understand who are the true friends, and then who is the rest of the tribe.
Yeah, 100%. Because that phone stops ringing rather quickly, out of sight, out of mind. And, it's only the guys that you are truly. And listen, a lot of us complain about other guys. No one calls. Well, do you call? Was I calling? You know what? When I was looking in the mirror, no, I wasn't calling myself. So how am I complaining about these guys not keeping up with me? We do that a lot, unfortunately. It's very easy to isolate. We go through all this trauma and stress at work, and a lot of times we just kind of want to be by ourselves and, sit with our own thoughts, and we don't want to answer to anyone. And, frankly, when you're going through it, your guys who are close to you are going to see it. So sometimes you tend to kind of keep away from them because you don't want to get asked these questions, man. What's up with you, bro? How you doing? You're obviously kind of struggling. Talk to me. A lot of times we don't want to do that. We think it's weakness. And it's a vicious cycle.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into the actual law enforcement journey, what was it that drove you into accounting in the first place?
That's a good question. My cousin and my uncle were both CPAs. My uncle had a flourishing business. He did very well. They lived in Connecticut, had a beautiful house. My father was always referencing Uncle Joe. Look at the way they live. You could live the same way. Go that accounting route. When you're young, you don't really know yourself. So how many kids do you know that really knew what they wanted to do for the rest of their lives? You go into what you think you're going to like. I thought accounting would be good. It wasn't something that got me excited by any stretch of the imagination, but I enjoyed it in college. And once it came to applying it, it was not for me. I don't know how, God bless him, I don't know how to do it.
It sounds like there was some admiration by your dad for his brother if he's literally trying to usher you into the same career and looking at some of the things that he's got as successful. And that seems to mirror exactly what you were experiencing with your dad, talking highly about you when you weren't there and then talking differently when you were there.
Yeah, this was actually his brother-in-law. This was my mom's brother. So he definitely put him on a pedestal, and rightly so. I mean, he was a great guy. He was a great dad. He was a very successful businessman. But it was funny because I would watch my dad interact with different people, and he acted differently with different people. And those whom he was a very intelligent guy, but those whom he considered maybe his level and above, I don't want to say he acted with reverence, but he definitely gave them a lot more respect. Definitely didn't like ply on. He had a very strong personality, and with people that he respected, he didn't like ply on his beliefs. He was a little more reserved, and I just kind of watch him, and I thought he was a hypocrite. I guess sometimes we all tend to change a little bit in our relationships and interactions with different people, but I hated the fact that he'd be screaming at us 1 second, and all of a sudden Uncle Joe and Aunt Janet would be there away getting to their house, and it was Mr. Nice Nice. Like, no, why don't you show them who you are? Come on. You have this fake act for everyone else. Let them see who you are. Because when I had very frank discussions with my cousins after my dad's death in 2020, a lot of them were surprised because there was nothing I ever spoke about. I mean, it was embarrassing, frankly, the way he spoke to me and some of the things he did to me. And then when I kind of opened up to them, they had no idea. It was nuts. I think they almost, I don't want to say they thought that I was lying, but I don't think they were believing me at first. And then as more things were happening and examples got brought up, or, maybe my mom acknowledged something, they realized that I was telling the absolute truth.
Well, you mentioned about being in an accounting cubicle asleep, going to someone that you thought was going to be, tell you the secret of the excitement of accounting, and obviously that didn't happen. So walk me through from that moment through the journey that took you through the front door of law enforcement.
Yeah, so literally that day, made that decision, was not going to be doing this, and started thinking about what I wanted to do. Simultaneously, I had been training with a guy doing martial arts for about 3 years at that point. I became pretty proficient at extreme violence, if you will. It's funny, I almost quit so many times, and when he first taught me, it was just this guy in his garage. He was a year younger than me, and we all grow up hearing this thing about black belts, and you think these guys are the baddest, and Karate Kid was this and that, and then you realize how unrealistic a lot of these fighting systems are. And he told me, he's like, forget everything you ever heard. He's like, I am going to teach you how to be a proficient fighter. And he's like, you're going to want to quit every day that I train you. He goes, that's fine. If you do, you'll be like most other guys. If you don't, I promise you it will change your life. And I never quit. I mean, I used to get my ass kicked. It was constructive. I don't want to say beatings. It was constructive training. But at one point, my cousin, myself, and a friend of ours were at a bar near Hofstra University, and I heard screaming. I look over, and my buddy, who's the meekest guy in the world, is getting yelled at by some guy, and he wants to fight him. So I walk over. I'm like, Jim, what's up? He's like, I bumped into this guy. I apologize. I offered to buy him a beer, and he won't stop. I'm like, what's up, brother? I'm like, my buddy apologizes. He wants no trouble. And he's like, F you, F him. I'll take both of yous on. And I was so calm. I'm like, hey, brother. I'm like, if we need to step outside, let's do that. And he's like screaming. I'm like, nah, I don't need to scream. I'm like, let's take care of business and do what we got to do. And he's like, look, you. And he just like kind of walks off. And I was so calm, so confident. I called my buddy the next day, and I didn't realize I had been kind of transforming myself. And I'm like, wow, bro. I'm like, I felt so confident, man. There was no fear whatsoever. And I guess as I'm thinking about what I wanted to do, I started, I don't know, it sounds weird to say, but I almost thought of myself as like this package where I could handle anything that came my way in the street. I hated bullies. So in one aspect, I wanted to stop bullying. I wanted to protect people who, innocent people from evil. I wanted to take evil off the street. I mean, there were a lot of reasons that I wanted to get into law enforcement, and I just thought that I was able to do this job now. Like I'd be able to do it confidently. I had common sense. I wasn't fearful. The action was calling me. I'm an adrenaline junkie as well. I never realized any of the subconscious things that were going on in my head about my father, and maybe some of the reasons why I was trying to enter the profession because of that. But at the time, I wanted to apply with the FBI. They were on a federal hiring freeze. This is late 1991. So the feds were on a hiring freeze, I believe, until 97 or 98. I kind of put that on the back burner, was trying to figure out other ways of getting into law enforcement. I was introduced to a buddy's brother who had just moved down to Atlanta, and he was telling me how great the city was. He had worked for Pan Am. They went bankrupt. Delta picked up his whole welding shop, and then he moved down to Atlanta. He's like, it's young, it's inexpensive, you'll love it, they're building it up. I said, you know what? I want to get out of New York anyway. Let me get some police experience, and then I'll apply with the FBI when they start hiring again. So lo and behold, applied in September of 92. And by August of 93, I was hired by Atlanta PD, and then moved down there late August 93.
So what was the conversation at the front door as far as the physical side, the fitness standards, combatives, etc., and then also the mental health conversation back then?
With
Atlanta. So when you first entered the front door, what was the kind of landscape looking like back then?
As far as mental health, you and I just talked more about mental health in the past 31 minutes than I spoke to anyone in my entire Atlanta career over 10 years. Literally, I'm not even joking around. We had a psychologist came in one day, and he basically told us, one, the physiological effects of extreme high stress situations on your body, then told us about how all of us are going to have at least one divorce under our belt, the percentage of alcoholics are going to develop, all the stats. Basically, I think he basically told us most of us we were racist for getting into the profession to begin with. And it was not really a learning experience, let's put it that way. That was the extent of our mental health talk. There was no peer support. There was no psych services at the time, developed later on. But as we both know, that was one of those situations where if you sought it, you were pretty much, your badge of going pulled. So guys never went that route. It was just never spoken about. Suck it up, buttercup. That was it.
That's so funny, because if you put a different profession in that same conversation that we get told about police and fire, and you were about to join an accounting firm, and they said, oh, you wait, in 10 years, you'll be on your third divorce and have an alcohol problem, you would say, well, fuck this. And you turn around and then leave straight away. And it's so sad that that's kind of like joked about in our profession, because it shows an immense flaw in the entire culture that has to be changed. And, on my side, I talk about the woeful work week. And both of our professions now, there's a recruitment crisis, because on your side, if nothing else, it's a complete lack of support by the media and the public. But, this isn't something to laugh about. It's not a badge of honor to have addiction and broken relationships. Going back to our conversation earlier of keeping the home intact, well, if a selfless, courageous profession is also going to lead to you having a fractured relationship with spouse and even children, then that's a conversation we need to be having today.
Exactly. And it's funny, not again, in a comedic sense, but I got divorced. I'm on my second marriage. This one's fantastic. I love her greatly, so I'll be good. But first one had not too much to do with the policing aspect of it. But additionally, I had a painkiller addiction in 2012 I was treated for. I speak openly about that. The extent of my drug use is smoking weed in high school. So I was fervently anti-drug my whole life. But I had been prescribing this medicine for years. And I realized when I was having marriage troubles that it kind of dulled the pain. So I just started taking more and more. And next thing I know, I'm hooked on tramadol. And I remember that first night, I'm in the rehab facility, and I'm crying, just kind of looking around at the room. And I'm like, how did I get here, man? I'm not supposed to be here. It's not, I've always tried to live an honorable life, and what am I doing? So, it's, I'm not blaming my career choice, but, there's a lot of unresolved trauma that we never deal with, and it just gets heaped upon more and more and more. And finally, we all have a saturation point. It's going to blow.
You mentioned about the martial arts training before. Firstly, what style or type of training was that?
So I guess like the base was Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee,
Mm-hmm.
but he believed that you should have very good. Our boxing was we did kickboxing, so it was Muay Thai combined, but um, my buddy's name was George Faraday. So he wanted boxing skill. He wanted you to be like an elite level of boxer. But there was so many other things combined. Like, if I was facing someone instead of a punch, it could be a chop to the throat. Be careful with that when you kill someone. Chop to the nose, break that. Just a little Aikido to take someone down. I mean, there was so many different things that they combined. It was a Vietnam vet that kind of started the system, and he just pieced these little things together, and it works. I mean, I've squared off 8 times, and 8 guys have been dealt with, and without me getting hit in the face. It's nothing about how great I am. Just the system was very effective, and I was taught very well.
So, what about again at the front door, as far as the combative defensive tactics back in the early '90s?
There weren't many. I mean, we have probably like an 8-hour block of defensive tactics training at Atlanta. It wasn't like you got into any type of jujitsu. A lot of it was gun retention. I remember, and literally it was like, hold your gun in as hard as you can in the holster. And, I was a little bit bigger of a guy. So instead of 1-on-1, they had 3-on-1 with me. And I remember we actually broke the holster, and I had every 10 fingers were all bloody. I mean, I was not giving that gun up. But that was very, very, very basic stuff. And even if they give a 40-hour block, it's incumbent upon any recruit to take their training to the next level. It's never going to be enough, as you know, that 40 hours of training, no matter what it is. But it was very, very minimal. And it's one thing I never understood. Like, I was pretty well trained. Obviously, I could have been 100 times better than what I was. But I went through years of training, and I wasn't like I felt that confident. But there were guys and girls who enter these professions with zero training, and they do nothing about it. And I don't understand it, because a lot of them, to me, almost experience PTSD on a daily, going to work knowing they are not ready when it kicks off. And it's a question of when, not if. It's going to happen.
There's been an absolute common thread between the police officers that I've had on the show who are in great physical shape. A lot of them are, purple, brown, black belt in various styles. And those are the ones that have the least hands-on, numbers, basically, because the de-escalation element of looking at someone and going, yeah, I'm not going to fuck with that person is huge,
Yep.
and police and
Yeah.
fire are very different. We don't need to be intimidating. We don't need to have that look in our eyes. It's more confidence amongst chaos that what we come into our own. But when it comes to law enforcement, yeah, there's certain people that you see in uniform. Like, I can't imagine anyone trying to fight that guy or female, trying to run from them. And it's so important. But as we're seeing this recruitment crisis and standards getting lowered and lowered, I feel like there's more and more videos that this is what happens. And when people say, "Oh, we don't have the money for more officers, more training, whatever it is," like, well, how much does each one of these mistakes cost? When they shoot the wrong person because, like you said, they went straight to lethal force without having the spectrum in between, or they simply didn't present a deterrent to this person even making bad choices in the first place, you're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars. So again, from the proactive side, it's such an important conversation, not to mention that a fit, able officer, just as you alluded to, is more likely to have a better time when it comes to their own mental health.
Absolutely. And, we call it command presence. When you step out of that car, everyone at that scene sizes you up immediately, man. And they see and smell, especially in the hood, fear in your eyes. And, you and I could see it too. You look at a man, you can tell if he's ready to roll or if he's shitting in his pants. And especially in the hood, man, the only way, there's no discourse. Every problem is dealt with violence. So they're constantly getting into it, people, and they can just look at people and know whether or not they're scared. So if you come, I've had plenty of guys and they were just talking shit. I'm like, brother, you are just a human target to me. Let's roll. And they were like, you see them like kind of reel back, like, whoa. And it wasn't like I was the baddest man in the world, but I had no fears. The only thing I worried about was getting embarrassed, getting knocked out. Like, physically, I don't know, you could break my nose, do whatever you needed to do. that did nothing to me. But I was like, man, if I ever lose a fight, it's gonna be so embarrassing. Plus, I have a gun on me, so they can, take that and pop one in my head, and I'm done. But it's so important. I just don't understand how you go to work in these professions and you are not ready physically. Come out of the car, look like a bag of laundry, obese. I mean, you're an embarrassment to yourself. You have a family. You owe it to them to show up in condition, ready to rock and roll. How about me? You may be able to called upon to save my life. I know if it's vice versa, I'm ready to kill or die for you. But you ready to do the same thing for me? And a lot of times the answer is no. And guys that look like that, they typically don't know the law either. It's not just a physical portion. They're not ready for anything. They have no idea. They're incompetent. But unfortunately, it's a numbers game. And these days, man, they just happy to get a signature on the line and hire someone. It is some of these videos I see. Wow, I would hand in my papers the next day if that was me.
Well, the thing is again, it's not shaming the person. Like I've said so many times, it's funny because this is what you were heading into, but I would be a terrible accountant. I was awful at maths, which is why one of my goals is to become a doctor, and it was the maths that stopped me. In chemistry, in physics, I'm like, okay, I literally just can't get my head around this. I'm done. Yep. So, it's not about, that you're a bad person. It's just that you're not the right person for law enforcement or fire or corrections or whatever the particular profession would be. And then you also factor in the people that have been on for a little bit that, the job does set you up for failure, which is why we need to have that conversation too. The work weeks and the shift schedules that allow a police officer or a firefighter to stay fit, to stay healthy and not gain weight. But then there's also that line in the sand. You can be the nicest person in the world. Fantastic. Doesn't mean that you're supposed to put on a first responder's uniform. And we got to acknowledge that too. And if you can't find enough people, you don't lower the bar. You figure out why do people not want to do this profession anymore? What needs to be fixed?
Yeah, but what's the solution nowadays? I mean, these guys and girls are seeing these videos of us, and 90% of the time it's our own doing. Especially, the one that blows me away these days is the fact that cops do not realize that you have no reasonable expectation of privacy when you're in the public. They can record you all day long. You see video after video of guys and girls approaching and going head to head with these auditors and other people about telling them they cannot video. Yes, they can. Just leave them alone. First of all, learn the law. Especially with cameras being everywhere these days, it's not unlikely that you may be recorded and shown publicly, just doing your job. And for you not to know the parameters of the law, that's a shame on you. The law is actually a weapon. It can be used if you know what you're doing. A lot of times these people on the street ask these cops, can you detain me? Can you do this? Can you do that? They can't even answer the question. You need to know what you're doing because it's an embarrassment to yourself if you don't. And, you forget about lawsuit. You're setting yourself up for failure, like you said.
Didn't Florida just put in a law where if you get too close to a scene, you're in danger of being arrested?
That I've not heard, but it's so subjective. What's too close?
Yeah, I think that's where it's kind of gray area. But I think, obviously, because there is, let's be honest, let's look at the other side of it now. If people are in our face and we're in, on the scene of a shooting, you don't know if that person was the perpetrator. We're a paramedic trying to work that person. So there is that. There's legitimately, the other side of the conversation where, no, you don't have the right to be right, in the middle of a bunch of first responders.
Yeah, that I agree with 100%.
So,
yeah. And, they should go for obstruction if they are, in fact, obstructing. But the fact that someone's solely recording you, from a safe distance, that's what I have a problem with. I have absolutely no problem with, you're establishing some type of perimeter and someone's violating it. You give them a warning, they do it again, time to go. Absolutely fine. But, it's a very subjective thing. Like, what is it, 8 feet, 10 feet, 12? What is the law now as far as, distance alone?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned about knowing the actual laws. There was a video, I had no idea as far as, the backstory, but it was, I think she said she'd been on 20 years and 10 years as a sergeant. But she was being interviewed by a lawyer. Obviously, she'd arrested someone because they'd asked for the ID and the person said no. And so they arrested them. So then they were saying, okay, well, under, what law Are you able to do that? And she couldn't even answer that. And she said, well, what are your Miranda rights? And she couldn't even answer that. 20-year law enforcement veteran. Now, I don't know them by heart, but I know that you're supposed to if you're in law enforcement. So yeah, that's the danger, isn't it? If you have the wrong person in uniform, think of the damage they could do. And then think about that. That's a sergeant. What are the
Yeah,
chances that she has created a huge amount of toxicity in a department because everyone beneath her knows that she doesn't even know how to do her own job? So there's
yeah.
so many reasons why these standards are set and they should be upheld.
Exactly. It could have been the same video for all I know, but I was watching a female sergeant. She was getting deposed. And if you've ever been deposed, man, it's pretty intense. And they asked her about detaining someone, and they asked her, when can you detain someone? And she couldn't even answer that.
Name's the same
So
one.
for those of you who are watching who don't know, you can detain someone when you think they committed a crime or about to commit a crime or are committing a crime. That's when you can detain someone. She couldn't even answer that as a sergeant, one of the most basic tenets in law.
Yeah, sounds like the same video. All right, well then let's go back to the first 10 years in Atlanta then. When you reflect back now, what were some of the career calls or calls that still stick with you? And it doesn't have to be anything horrendous either. It could be, moments of compassion and empathy. But what are some of the ones from that period of your life?
Let's see, I'll start off with literally my first night. So we finished the academy on a Monday. Excuse me. We graduated after field training. So next day field training starts. I was working midnight. So we started 11 p.m., worked to 7 a.m. By midnight, the first night, so I'm an hour into my first tour. I'm at my first homicide scene. And that was a crazy story. He was actually an Atlanta police captain off duty. He was on suspension for allegations of him messing with younger girls. I guess they would confirm that night. He went and picked up a prostitute. She was 16 years old and decided he wanted to smoke crack. So he pulls up to the local dope boy, orders his rock. Dope boy looks in the car, and who does he see? You talk about a small world. His 16-year-old cousin pulls out a gun, puts one on the guy's head, brain matter everywhere. So first hour. By 4 a.m., myself and my partner received a homicide call in our sector. So first night, 5 hours in, 2 homicide scenes. And it only got crazier. As far as memorable calls, man, there's so many. I'll tell you the first truly traumatic one, and I never processed this really. I get a call for an unresponsive 11-year-old, and our medical training in Atlanta consisted of CPR. That's probably it, to be honest with you. When I went to Suffolk County back on Long Island, we were first responder, basic first responders. So had a little bit of medical training, but I get to the scene and his mother, his grandmother, and his aunt are in the living room in hysterics. He's on the ground, face up, on his back, eyes are wide open. I go over, touch him. He's cold to the touch, no pulse. I know he's dead. No one's bringing him back, but they are in hysterics, and there's no way I'm sitting here doing nothing while I'm waiting for paramedics to come. So start doing CPR. As I'm doing compressions, I can hear liquid coming up his windpipe and throat, and I'm like, that should not be there. So doing compression, you could hear it getting closer. Finally, I put him on his side, and just green liquid just pours out of his mouth. I'm like, what the hell was that? Just then, paramedics of fire walk in, and I literally look up, and I'm like, what the fuck? So it turns out he died of bacterial meningitis. So they took him and 2 of the women in the ambulance. I transported the third, and the whole way there, she's in hysterics, and she just asked me, please, officer, tell me he's going to be fine. And to those of you who are active, never tell anyone someone is going to be fine when you know. Don't tell them anything you know to be untrue, but certainly never tell them someone's going to be fine when you know they're not. So I said, ma'am, I promise you, they're working him as hard as they can, knowing full well he was dead. And we get to the hospital. Doctors figure out what happened, explain it. And bacterial meningitis is not easily transferable from child to adult. So they gave me a massive dose of antibiotics. They essentially told me to quarantine for 48 hours. So had I not had to do so, I would have gone back in service immediately as soon as I got back to the zone. But I was able to go home for those 2 days. Didn't really think about it, what I had just been through. Just kind of pushed that to the side. But eventually, when it got me, it was calls like that, being inside the most devastatingly intimate moments of other people's lives for 30 years, that kind of created my PTSD, which I only realized after I retired. Man, there were so many calls. I'm trying to think of good ones. I'm sure some will come to light here. Uh, this is a pretty good one. This is my first. I'm about. Let's see. So we get out of the academy after field training, probably end of May. So this is probably early September. We've been on foot beat. There's about 10 of us in Zone 3, which is where I worked. And we worked in what was called a mini precinct. With us were narcotics detectives. So there was 4 of them. 2 called out that night. So 2 were going to be riding by themselves. They asked if myself and my partner would like to ride along with them. I'm like, hell yeah. So the boss A-okayed it. We were going in plain clothes with these guys. So they know everyone and everything. We kind of roll up to this certain dole pole in the Pittsburgh area, it's called, and they knew all the dealers. We get out of the car, we're talking to them, and nothing adversarial is going on. We're just having a conversation. And the way it unfolded was we kind of went in this circle of guys. There's probably about 8 guys. Again, nothing adversarial. It's just the way semantics unfolded that night with us speaking. So just then a Jeep pulls up, and I walk up to the driver's side of the Jeep, shine my flashlight in the window, and I see this guy with ended up having a Carhartt jacket on. It was a really big pocket. And I could see the butt of a gun sticking out. So I opened the door, grabbed the gun. It was .380, threw it in my pocket, told him to get out of the car. He's under arrest. Had I had a little more time on, I would have grabbed his wrist and just taken him immediately to the ground. But rookie mistake. My partner gets in between us for some reason. I don't know why to this day. And this dude just elbows my partner in the face, takes off running. So he makes a right turn, but there's dirt on the ground. So he spills, falls down, gets up, squares off with me. So he throws a left, a block at my right. I still have my flashlight in my hand, so I'm not going to lie. I try to break his collarbone. So I hit him a little high up here on his left side. So he just screamed and went down like that with that Muay Thai clench. Boom, knee to nose, broke that nose. Done. So started like a mini riot. I didn't realize he was the man. He was like the head dope boy, Ricky Giles. I still remember this guy's name, Rick. So we had like a mini riot. We had to quell that. Take it back to the precinct. We threw him the prisoner van pulled up, paddy wagon pulled up. We threw him in there with his brother. They were both cuffed. They got over on us because they dumped like 200 hits of crack behind the bench. We found it the next day. But I get a notification for a federal parole revocation hearing for him. He was on federal parole 2 months later. So I have to go. I'm testifying. And one of the attorneys asked for a sidebar. I love the story. So it's the 2 attorneys speaking to the judge. She's to my left. I'm kind of looking around the room, and all of a sudden, he and I just lock eyes. And now he's just eye-effing me. And I meant to mouth the words, but I said out loud, fuck you. You had to see this judge's head just like snap to the right. I'm like, I apologize, Your Honor. The federal prosecutor her mouth was just agape. She didn't know what to say. And the judge was kind of looking around. She didn't really know what to do at first. Then they went back to the sidebar and went back to the hearing after that. But it was just pretty funny. But this dude, I don't know how he got away with it. Well, I know how, because he was such a bad dude that no one would testify against him. But I don't even know how many bodies this guy had on him. And it's weird. The first time that you get into a physical altercation on the street, you're not really sure. By law, you're allowed to use just a little bit more violence than they're using against you to overcome it. But you're not really sure. You never did it before. So you're like, did I do too much? Am I going to get in trouble? And everything was fine. Never heard from him again. Those guys told me I did a great job. But, it was kind of baptism by fire. The first time I get into a little bit of confrontation, literally squared off with a badass dude. So, it was a good baptism by fire, and you don't realize it, but you get a reputation pretty quickly in the hood. So that cement of mine worked out well for me.
Well, I know we're going to talk about psychedelic therapy in a little bit, which is such an interesting perspective now, because so many of the people that wore a uniform, either in our military or first responders, are now having to go overseas to find the very treatment that they need for, the trauma they accumulated through their service. And so the whole drug prohibition thing, I talk about this all the time, there's a difference between the smugglers and the dealers. That is a crime. You are trying to benefit off the addiction of other people. But when it comes to the addicts themselves, my personal thing is that I feel like the war on drugs is a complete failure, like an 80-year, longitudinal study that's been a failure. With this 3-decade lens that you have, in different places within the States, What is your perspective of the efficacy of the war on drugs? And if you were king for a day and thought something needed to change, what would that be?
That's a great question. I mean, the war on drugs is a joke, frankly. We are losing it by far. You know, you'll see interviews with cartel members, and they'll talk about sending like 10 shipments out in a day, and 7 or 8 of them get through. So we stopped those too. But I mean, the overwhelming amount of drugs is arriving here, and frankly, it's because of the simple economics. I mean, there's a market for it, supply and demand is huge. So as far as winning it, I'm not sure what the answer is, because other than legalizing it and going that route, I don't see how we're ever going. There's just too much money involved to ever win. There's so much corruption involved, up to the highest levels of government, both ours and, every other country that's involved in the trade. There's no easy answer for that one, to be honest with you. I was always against legalizing it, but I don't know. I don't think that's the answer either. I don't know. It's unwinnable. So I don't know what you do. You can't raise a white flag. I don't know. And I apologize. The second part of your question was...
No. That was you answered it. If you were king for a day, what would you change? And you're literally saying, I don't know. And I think this is what's really interesting with your community, is if there is going to be any profession that is the hardest to even get to acknowledge that maybe the way you're doing it isn't working, it's law enforcement. Because you guys from the academy were taught, these are the laws, drugs are bad, go arrest the bad people. And that, you look at it over so many decades, and then you start understanding the origin story of prohibition, and Harry Anslinger, just when alcohol prohibition ended, because it was an epic failure, and that's why we know Al Capone, for example, he comes in screaming racist, job justification, and this is, what starts the reefer madness, and then it got worse and worse from there. What was really interesting, and I've said this on the show several times now, about just over 25 years ago, I think, my mum and my brother moved to Portugal from England. And when I started the podcast, like a year or so into it, she said, hey, did you know what they did about the addiction problem here in Portugal? And what had happened, a lot of Portuguese soldiers were out in, one of the African countries that was one of their colonies, supporting, that government in some sort of war. And they basically came back, and there was a huge opioid epidemic they brought with them. And so the Portuguese are a very unique group, because they're kind of looked down upon by a lot of the more affluent European countries. But if you look at them, they do a lot of things more traditionally. And as we know, as we're about to talk about, some things that we've done a long time ago are actually the right way of doing it. So they put it to the country. They're like, look, we're doing this war on drugs thing, and it's not working. This American model isn't working. And so they put it to the entire nation to a vote. What if we took addicts and we put them in the hands of the medical community, not the law enforcement community?
Law enforcement, yep.
Yeah. Now, they're still going to arrest any dealer, any smuggler, but they're going to take the money that they had in the war on drugs. And this is what we don't see in some of these little pockets that have supposedly tried it. They put a huge amount of money instead into addiction counseling, mental health counseling, job creation, housing, to actually get the struggling Portuguese man or woman back on their feet, so they could then get back into the workforce, pay taxes, and be a functioning member of society. And I had the man, João Goulart, who spearheaded this on the show twice now. I sat with him in Lisbon the first time, and it was less than 10 years. They went from the worst in Europe to the lowest. They are now the lowest addictions. And what they did is they just looked at people that were addicts as people that were struggling, people that had mental health challenges that needed to be brought back into, to be picked up, basically. And then what that did is it freed up the law enforcement and the court system to then hammer down on the addicts and the smugglers. But if you, like you said, with economics, if you get people to heal and you also allow the medical community to take care of addiction, you just cut the head off the snake for the dealers and the smugglers, because it's supply and demand. But what we did with prohibition is we drove every addict into the hands of the underworld. And then lo and behold, Mexico, El Salvador, Colombia, we created those nightmares that they have in this country. Now we're building walls to keep Mexicans out who are fleeing from the very thing that we created. So I really feel like the Portuguese model, which is decriminalization. So you're not going into the grocery store and buying meth and crack. But if you have addictions, you're going, and if you get arrested, well, you get stopped, detained, you get with a personal amount of drugs, you get an education on the resources that are available. You're not forced into doing it. So these people that were scared of being arrested, they're like, oh, so I'm not going to be arrested as an addict. Right. Well, then I'm going to go look for help. But if we're worried about being arrested and have a criminal record, and now your ability to work is even, harder, it's a vicious circle downwards in our model here. But I think the Portuguese model is incredible, and it really is held, highly about the rest of the world. But to our point collectively, the first thing we have to do is acknowledge that there's a problem and acknowledge that the way we're doing it now isn't working, and it's making a few people very rich at the suffering of everyone else.
Yeah, I agree. And what I love about the Portuguese model is, excuse me, if you were to take, say, 10 addicts and you just bring them in a room and you interview them one by one, the percentage is going to be extremely low of people that are living, very vitally happy lives. Most people get addicted to drugs because they're trying to forget about something that's going on. It's rare that you get someone that's just physically addicted, but, the rest of their life is going great. So if you sit there and you talk to these people and you find out why they're using, and then you treat that problem, whether it was sexual abuse, there's going to be, I would say, almost 100% certainty that these people are going through other things that drove them to drugs. If you treat that root cause, you're going to now have someone that no longer needs those drugs, because that problem that they were trying to forget is no longer there. Or, they've treated it. They've processed whatever trauma it is out of their psyche, so to speak. It's very basic stuff here that I'm saying, but the concept is you're treating the core of whatever drove them to those drugs to begin with, and that's what you have to do.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I always say, the analogy of the fairy tale, the princess and the pea. Like, you've got to get to the thing beneath the thing. What is the nucleus, as we kind of talked about with your early life? The inability to ever feel good enough for your father. That's one of the pieces of this. So now let's say you're in 2012 and you're kind of finding opioids filling that void, and they're like, oh, Mike's just a piece of shit addict. Like, it's so much more than that. And if Mike now feels like he's got to go into the underworld, and now he gets arrested, and now he's in prison, and now the predators are preying on his addiction, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. Instead of simply saying, look, you're using these drugs for a reason. Let's find what that reason is. Let's do whatever needs to be done, whether it's traditional or modern therapies, or whether it's something more traditional like ayahuasca. Help you grow from that and then get you back on your feet.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like the antidepressant SSRI, prescription, I don't know, epidemic, I call it. It's ridiculous. Everything is you're just treating it with a Band-Aid. You're never getting to the core problem of, what's depressing these people. It's very, very rare that you're going to have a chemical imbalance. I read something the other day where scientists are now doubting whether or not that's even a valid issue, if that's a valid, what's the word I'm looking for here? Medical condition. So if you don't get to the core, the root cause of that, you're going to prescribe all these other medications to these people as well. It's the same exact thing. It's just a Band-Aid for something that needs some type of, critical and intensive therapy. That's the only way it's going to get cured, not by this pill. Those things make them feel, I've never been on them, but every single person I've ever spoken to who's taken them and has tried to get off says they feel absolutely nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's no way to live.
Absolutely not. Well, going back to your kind of career journey, you mentioned Atlanta for 10 years. What was it that made you leave that department, and where was it that you found yourself?
Yeah, so as I was going through, I had been taking, again, Long Island's broken up into Nassau and Suffolk counties. Each have their own police department. So I had been taking their tests throughout. Nassau was weird. They had a 9-part test. They were throughout 7 out of the 9 parts. So I didn't do well on their test in 96. And Suffolk County had a test in 97. I got 100 on it. I was expecting to be called in 98 into an academy class. Then they had a cheating issue. Part of the test was biographical, and they found out that they had, 29 minority recruits, and all 29 they cheated on the test. So instead of throwing out the test that 39,000 people took because all these guys cheated, they threw out the entire test. So I had to retake it in, I think, 99. Got a 90 on that, but that lower grade just caused me to have to wait till to get on the job in 03. But I guess my biggest draw back then was becoming, it's funny to say it now, becoming geographically close to my family again. Although we weren't close, I was always trying to be the good son. I thought it'd be the best thing to do to get back close to my family. That was my biggest draw. Friends and family, friends as well, back in New York that were still there, I had missed. But I don't think I realized how deeply roots I was setting in Atlanta had become, because when I left, I really started missing Atlanta. I'd actually started a police fire hockey team as well. That had gotten pretty big. We became a 501(c)(3), had like a $40,000 a year budget. I think we raised like $160,000 in 3 years for charities. So when I did make the move, I kind of felt out of place when I went back to New York. I remember calling back to one of my old majors. I was on a short list to go to Canine. And I'm like, is that still available? Because I'll come back. And he's like, nah, they just changed the rules. You have to have 3.5 years continuous service on the street. So you'd have to go back to the street 3.5. I'm like, nah, that's not happening. So ended up staying. I guess the biggest thing was my family. And it's a joke because we were never that close, and I was trying to be the good son. And I don't want to say I sacrificed myself, but I was making decisions based largely on a relationship that didn't exist.
You mentioned about all these multiple tests and all these different parts. Talk to me about how competitive it was to be a cop, whether it was testing for Atlanta or in 03, compared to what you're hearing now in 2025.
Let's see. Atlanta wasn't that difficult to get on. Suffolk County it's one of the highest paid jobs in the nation. So again, when I took that test in 97, it was 39,000 people that took it. In 99, I think it was like 24,000. I mean, it was a very, very sought after job, very difficult to get on. And let me compare that to, I think their last test, they had, I don't want to get numbers wrong, but maybe a 10th of the applicants, possibly a little bit more, but nothing compared to the amount of people that used to apply. And it's just, unfortunately, people are looking towards other careers, knowing that they're up for public scrutiny at any moment in time. And even if you do everything right, you could be subjected to that.
If I gave you a magic Harry Potter wand and you could wave it, what would need to change to get those lines wrapping the building again? Because I've made this point very many times in my short career. When I tested in California, it was 1,000 certified firefighter, paramedics, or EMTs with a resume sitting at that written test for 30 jobs, 30. Now, and I don't know Anaheim specifically, but now, there's departments literally that have 5 openings and 5 people apply. So now instead of taking 1% of the list, you're taking 100% of the list. Very, very different conversation and a much higher chance that you've got the wrong person in the uniform. So back to the question, you're holding this magic wand. What would we need to change to get back to that level of hunger to be in uniform?
That's a great question. I think several things. The genie's out of the bag in several respects, never going back. So, body cameras are here to stay. That scrutiny's here to stay. The biggest thing I think guys and girls are worried about is that they're not going to be backed up by the administration. So when you see chiefs and, command staff that is behind their people, guys and girls know who that is and who is running departments that way. There are multiple departments down here in Florida that have waiting lists that I'm aware of, that I've spoken to, young guys. There won't be openings for years. And when they are, they're filled quickly with applicants. So the biggest thing is telling these administrators that if you don't have their backs, you're not going to be getting quality applicants. And they know who and who does not have their employees' backs. And I don't understand, frankly, as a chief, how that cannot be the number one priority in your job is supporting your officers. There's a multitude of other things you have to do, I understand, but you should be an advocate for your cops. Someone screws up, listen, it's on them. But short of that, it is so easy, and it's such an act of cowardice to bury your cops these days. And you see guys and girls doing it in these command staffs immediately before the facts are in. Just burying their own people. And from a perspective of you're probably getting sued, so you making these negative comments and conceding that this guy or girl did something wrong to begin with is full. It's just logically, I don't understand why you do it, because you're setting yourself up for a bigger lawsuit or, for that video to be brought in as evidence of what you said. It blows my mind, to be honest with you. That would be the biggest thing. Show support.
I hear that over and over again. And I hear, conversely, when I ask people, when I listen to people's stories, a lot of times, aside from obviously, some of the traumas that we brought into the job, some of the clearly traumatic calls that we responded to, the other elephant in the room, aside from sleep deprivation, which especially in my population, is organizational betrayal. And I see it like locally here. Both departments have lost numerous people, just to mental health issues alone, overdoses and suicides. And you have these chiefs that work 40 hours a week, that go home at 5 o'clock, Monday to Friday, to their family, weekends off, that don't have the fucking backbone to stand up and fight for a healthy work week that will then increase recruitment and retention, so therefore get rid of the mandatory overtime for their people. And I don't understand how you can lose people that are under your command and be unmoved by it. I mean, the cowardice is nauseating. And I would allude, really, if you can sleep at night when your people are dying and you're not doing anything to change it, then you need to get a mental health analysis yourself, because only a sociopath would bury their own people and then sleep soundly at night.
Yeah, I agree, James. I mean, I was talking to a buddy of mine, Chris Martinez. He talks publicly about this, so I'm not talking out of turn. And he was going through an addiction when he was on the job. And he sent an email to one of his sergeants about asking for help. I need help. I'm drowning here. And the guy didn't even reply. Like, how? As a man, forget about being a cop or his boss. Like, this guy's essentially telling you, I'm going to kill myself if I don't get help. And you don't reply? That's mind-boggling to me. To your reference about the sleep as well, Nassau County, our brother agency to Suffolk, has they do 12-hour tours. So they do 3 on, 4 off, 2 on, 3 off. And we wanted to go to that schedule. But our PBA, which is super, super strong, would not be able, those guys could not work that schedule. They'd still have to do their 5/8. So they didn't really care too much about changing it for us. So the effort was minimal to change that calendar. And, my thing is, shame on you guys. Like, this could help us, and you guys won't do it, or aren't, not going headstrong into this because it's not going to benefit you guys. When in fact, if you see the pay that these guys get, they get regular pay. Our first 150 hours of overtime, we're able to bank it. So you typically get raises before the end of the year. So your 150 then get paid out at the next higher rate. So those guys are allowed to do that. Those guys get paid hazard duty pay for being in a PBA. They get, it's incredible. They vote these raises themselves or these benefits themselves. It's like, it's literally like government. And they're a super strong union, but I think it's sickening some of the things that they'll do for themselves. But if it's not applicable to them and it could help us, it's kind of put by the wayside. They're not really, it's not a big prerogative for them, to be honest with you. Not a big priority.
Yeah, and this is what I see. And again, pointing to some great leaders. We've seen, for example, from the fire side, 10 fire departments now in the state of Florida the last 2 years go to the 42-hour work week, making that courageous change. And this is, people obviously at all ranks, within unions, chief officers, city and county managers. There are some great people there, but they are, the anomalies at the moment. And I was thinking, It's funny you said about the hazard pay, because I had this very thought the other day. If you are not you're not required to have any courage once you're wearing bugles, and you're in an office position, then you shouldn't get the high risk pension.
Yep.
If you're pushing papers behind a desk and you're like, oh, I have no accountability for the people under me now, then great. Then you need to go to a regular civilian pension then at that point. If you're actually going to wear the uniform of a firefighter and advocate for your people and keep that pension, then you need to actually do what's right for them. So I don't think that's unfair.
No, not at all. And one I just popped in my head, another benefit they get is full night diff. So if you're on day tours in Suffolk County, you don't get night diff from 3 p.m. Is it 3 p.m.? I think it's either 3 p.m. or 6 p.m. on qualifies you for night differential. So full night diff is only given to midnight guys because they're working 9p to 7a. These guys somehow managed to get full night diff for themselves, although I can imagine how many times they're actually working at night. It's ridiculous. I mean, their base pay is well over $200,000. I think it's like 2.25. I don't want to speak out of turn, but something like that before a moment of overtime for these guys.
Now, when you say PBA, is that the union? Is that the benevolent?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. See, this is
Police Benevolent Association.
And this is, again, what I hold, the poor unions accountable. I am a huge believer in the union philosophy. Like when we, united we stand, divided we fall. I mean, it makes perfect sense. But for example, our national union works, their headquarters, the president is out of Boston, 42-hour work week, 24/72. Zero conversation of making that, the standard across the country, while a lot of our firefighters are working, 56 hours a week. Our federal firefighters are working 72 hours a week, 24 on, 24 off. So there are so many people that are just getting absolutely battered. And our very union that I paid into the whole time I was wearing a uniform have never mentioned the work week once, which I would argue for a union is the very first thing that you address is the working conditions.
Exactly.
So there are great unions out there. Pasco County, shout out to Dixon Phillips, perfect example. Him and his people, not just him, of course. But, when you take millions and millions and millions of dollars of union dues and then are not fighting for your people, whether you're a chief, whether you're a city or county manager, or whether you're in the union in this case, it's disgusting. And I think the more that we discuss it, the more we acknowledge it, the more we can force change, because they are not fighting for anyone else but themselves in those situations.
Yeah, I think it's disgusting, frankly. I mean, it's great having a union, but sometimes when you see the activities, we call it the mafia. Some of the things that are done and the way they're accomplished, it literally just reminds you of a corrupt government. It's great when you need them and they're there for you, but other times you're just shaking your head like, aren't you guys supposed to be advocating for us? And it's funny. I thought that 24/72 was across the board in the U.S. now. FDNY has been doing it for so long. My father did it at the end of his career. Actually, he didn't do it. He drove the chief of the department, but it was enacted prior to the end of his career. I just assumed everyone would have gone to it. That's crazy, 24/24.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Absolutely.
I can't even imagine.
No. And then again, it's, without going too deep down that rabbit hole, if you look at all the things that plague first responders, it is directly correlated with sleep deprivation, shift work, from the cancers to the obesity issues, to the testosterone depletion, to the suicide and addiction. It's not the sole thing, but it's an amplifier of literally every single one of those. So if you wanted to have the biggest bang for your buck, then you look at, law enforcement shifts and try and give as much rest and recovery as you can and stop bouncing from day to night. And in the fire side, you put a 24, do a 24-hour shift. It's 72 hours is when you return to baseline. That's a 42-hour work week. Going to an accounting thing, if you were just working for a firm, you would do a 40-hour work week without having to risk your life at all or be up all night. So it is such a crazy environment that you would have to even convince people that the men and women that you call on your very worst day should work at least the same number of hours as the person that makes your coffee. It's insanity.
Yeah, it really is. And for those of you who kind of minimizing this sleep condition argument, think about getting one horrible night's sleep and how you function the next day, and then put yourself in a firefighter's shoes, and it's never going to correct itself. It is, I can't even imagine working 24/24 for you guys. I mean, I used to do midnights every now and then in overtime, and I enjoyed working at night, but the next day you're done. Your sleep is all off. So I'm going to bed now at 8 a.m., which I'm usually waking up probably getting up at 2. Horrible sleep those 6 hours that I got, and then I'm going to sleep early the next night to make up for it. I can't imagine having to go to work the next day again.
Yeah,
It's horrendous.
it is. Yeah, one of my California friends just did a 5-day shift, so 120-hour shift. I mean, it just,
What?
again, the potential for accidents, mistakes, etc., are just through the roof. Not to mention the impact on their health. But anyway, I
I can't
digress.
even imagine he was
So
allowed to do that. Yeah.
yeah, now they are. This is the problem because again, the people that say you're allowed to, they go home 5 o'clock. It doesn't affect them. All right. Well, then you move back to New York. So what were the differences between the time you spent in Atlanta and the rest of your career in New York?
Wow. It was the quality of life cannot be described. It was one end of the spectrum to the next. Put it this way, James, I had to literally, I'm not joking about this, I had to get used to the fact that when I was now driving past people on the street, they were not spitting and yelling, fuck the police. And people were waving to us. I clearly remember, first time it happened, it was with my FTO. Someone waves to us and he waves. I'm like, they just waved hi? He's like, yeah, why? I'm like, brother, I go, if they weren't giving me a finger, they were not raising a hand in Atlanta. And, we'd go maybe get something to eat or wherever we were. People would be like, officer, thank you so much for what you do. I'm like, they're talking to us. Like, literally, I had to change the way I spoke to people. You're so, I don't want to say defensive, but you're always in like condition orange in Atlanta. I mean, you're just ready to rock all your heads on a swivel. And it's a lot more of a relaxed atmosphere. Not that I was ever in like code white where I'm walking around with my head on my ass, but just a very, very different dynamic. Bosses were great. Wasn't used to that. Atlanta was very adversarial a lot of times with bosses. Plus, we didn't really have a union, so they could do whatever they wanted to us, essentially. Let's see. What was weird was Atlanta, we didn't get paid anything, but our equipment was great. We always had the newest, latest gadgets. Suffolk was the opposite. We got paid great, but I guess consequently our budget kind of suffered in terms of equipment. We have like older cars, just older everything, not the newest and greatest of anything. And it surprised me. I thought it was going to be the opposite. But yeah, it was a different world. The crime that I saw in Atlanta, I saw in Suffolk County, but on much, much smaller scale. It was nothing close to it that I experienced in Atlanta.
What were the reasons for the differences? The same country, human beings. So when you kind of peel back the layers, what were the origins of one area being so dangerous and another area being more aligned with how we would originally think of community policing?
Yeah, so when I was in Atlanta, I was in the inner city. Worked a lot of projects, definitely depressed areas. From a socioeconomic standpoint, it was night and day. If we're kind of looking at a scale here, this being the poorest and this being the richest, Suffolk County. Now I'm in the suburbs, and you're at least middle class to extremely wealthy, depending on where I was in my precinct alone. Literally, I mean, I'd say that was the one difference. I mean, it was heavily, heavily populated with Black people in Atlanta as well, and much more populated with white people in Suffolk where I worked. There was a nice sized Spanish population in Huntington Village, which is station rather, one of the areas that I worked. But socioeconomically, it was just incomparable. It was such a difference in, I'm going to guess the average income in Atlanta was probably 15,000. And where I worked in Suffolk County, I'm going to guess it was probably like 75,000. I mean, it was that much of a, discrepancy.
It's funny because I mean this is the thing is that people in their mind think of certain areas. Oh, that's because there's a certain group of people here, and it's not. It's like you said, socioeconomic status. One of the places I worked in Orange County in the Orlando area, we had like a very strong kind of Haitian group that we had. Some people like directly there, and some people obviously were multi-generational. And then we had a place called Taft, which was pretty much all white, but again, very, very poor. And so we saw similar incidents in both of those. And it wasn't about, the pigmentation of people's skin. it was these behaviors born out of desperation. And obviously, culturally, Haiti has always been, going through the mill anyway. So if you come from that kind of environment into the States, you're already conditioned with violence and tragedy and all that kind of thing too. So you've got to take that on board. But
oh yeah,
when I worked for the very last place where I was protecting Disney World, anyone that was coming there obviously wasn't doing too badly because they could afford Disney World, which is completely price gouging from the moment you drive through the front gates. So you had a different group of people. And so, it wasn't about, again, because they were from all over the world, but if they could afford to go to Disney World, the chances of them slinging crack outside Magic Kingdom were pretty slim. You know what I mean? Whereas Orange Blossom Trail in Orlando, you had all the red light activities going on there. So when you look at that and you realize that if you're just able to kind of help the areas that are struggling rise up, like we said, proactive initiatives like, drug decriminalization and putting real food back in schools and all these other things that would make people healthier and happier, it wouldn't be about, someone's ethnicity. It would just be simply raising people up in the wealthiest country on the planet so that we're eliminating the desperation and therefore a lot of the things that you and I saw in our careers.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when people reference the criminal justice system as racist, I say it's not. I say it is 100% stacked against poor people. You are 100% getting a different experience if you have money as opposed to not having money when you go through the court system. And that goes for anyone. It's got nothing to do with race. If you could afford that $1,000 an hour lawyer, you're going to do much better than, a court-appointed public defender. You just alluded to the fact serving healthier food. James, I remember going into some of these supermarkets in the hood and just looking at what these poor people were getting served. It was disgusting. And these are supermarkets. It's not like it's getting sold out of someone's car. I'm like, this is nuts. I can't believe these people are getting served this quality of food. It was disgusting. And frankly, it blew me away. I didn't realize that there was such a difference between what you're getting in the hood in a quote unquote supermarket. It was a local supermarket, not a big chain, as opposed to, what people are getting in middle income areas. It was disgusting to see. I felt so bad.
I had a guy on the show, Pasi Sahlberg, who's from Finland, but he lives in Australia now and basically travels the world talking about the Finnish education system, which is usually number one in the world rankings. And when there is an area that is struggling, we see it here, when there's an area that's struggling, the schools get penalized. The grades go down, they get less funding. Finland does the opposite. When they're, as a community where maybe they have to lean more on the schools and the teachers, they put more support, more finances in so that they can kind of be that cribbing for that community and raise the next generation up. And we do the polar opposite here. If you don't score well on the standardized test, you get penalized. So again, now you've got this kind of class system where if you can afford a good education, your chances of, succeeding in society go up immensely. But if you are born into poverty and then the schools in those areas are being penalized, what are the chances then for you springboarding into some amazing career?
Yeah, I mean, you're set up for failure from the get-go, and it's a shame to see. I don't know. I think these charter schools are one answer because they seem to be doing fantastic in most cities that they've been born. But now, you have public school unions fighting them. They don't want them here. It becomes another political hotbed issue. You're never going to be poor and receive the quality of anything that you are when you have money. It's just a simple fact. Here, anyway. Other places in the world, I'm sure, are set up differently, but it's a sad but true fact.
Yeah. And it takes humility. And I think this is the problem. Until we have someone, let me rephrase that. Until we redefine the way that we even choose the people that we call leaders, so that you don't have to be a millionaire devoid of ethics, that you can just be a good person and rise through that, we're going to keep getting the same shit every 4 years. Yep. We've seen that for decades now. But when you have someone who really has a heart for the American people, and the humility to go to other countries and say, Norway, show us how you're doing prisons. The UK, before it's got picked apart, talk to me about the national health. Finland, talk to me about your schools. Japan, how are you avoiding homelessness and obesity? I mean, that is how we change it, because we are an amazing country, but there are a lot of areas that we need to fix. So, but if we keep just allowing this system where these, wealthy people are lining, lobbyists' pockets, then, we keep getting the same thing, and we're going to get fatter and sicker, and our streets and schools are going to get more dangerous, and our first responders are going to diminish down to nothing. And then one day, this is genuinely a realistic concern. You're going to call 911 and you're just going to get a dial tone. That's it. Now what?
Yeah. It's the truth. The game is rigged. Something's got to be done, revolutionary to change things. Or I think that's what we're going to be looking at eventually, is some type of revolution. I mean, the course has to correct itself. And there are no simple answers. I mean, we just seem to be getting more divided as time goes on. And I don't know. I don't know what the answers are in many respects, just politically, socially. We're divided. We're a divided people. We're supposed to be. It's one thing I've learned in this healing journey is that we're all connected, but unfortunately, many people are hurting and have not healed, and they're never gonna feel that concept. But we're all in this together, whether people like it or not. And it's a shame that we have so many teams, and they're all pitted against each other.
Well, I mean, I think the reason we have that is because there's a mental health crisis. That's why people would allow their families and friendships to be fractured by a mask or a vaccine, or think that an orange or dementia-ridden Jesus is their Messiah, when neither of them give a flying fuck about them. So that shows to me that when you get people stressed and tired enough because they're just simply trying to work and pay their mortgage, that you can then, cleave the nation in the middle and do whatever you want. So I think that the way forward is healing. I really do. So good segue into this next part of the conversation. You mentioned, you kind of touched on 2012 and the opioid addiction that you had. As you look back now over the last few decades, what were some of the lows? And then let's kind of walk through how you found plant medicine as a solution.
Yeah, so let me see. Lows, I guess my first marriage, I was kind of going through it around that 2010, 2012 area. She and I had got together in Atlanta. We got engaged in Atlanta. We owned a house together. And, all along I had said, if I get Suffolk County, I'm going to move back up there. So she knew every step of the way that was my plan. And, she's like, all right, I love you. I'll go. And then when we moved up, most of her family, the part that she was really tight with, was still in Atlanta. She was actually born in New York, but her mom moved her down when she was 5. So she still has family in New York, but she and her mom were best friends. So it was tough for her to adjust, and my family did not make it easy. I have a very jealous sister, so I know she didn't want to see my mom and her have a good relationship. So she tried to sabotage that as much as possible. And, to be honest, I was trying to make everyone happy. No one was happy, which ended up kind of making me miserable. So that's what kind of led to the painkillers. And, once I got help, things were good after that. We ended up splitting in 2018. We just become roommates. It was nothing like, we were adversarial. We were coming home fighting every day. No drama. It's just we became roommates, and I was turning 50, and my dad had just gotten diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He was at 75, and I'm like, you know what? I don't want to spend the next 25 years of my life just kind of going through the motions. And if, God forbid, I get diagnosed at 75, I just wasted that last 25 years. So we ended up splitting, and I told her, I'm like, you're going to thank me in the end. You're going to find, the man of your dreams, because I don't think it's me. And now looking back that I'm healed, I think the reason why I was with my ex-wife is because I loved her family, and they gave me the love that mine never did. And I never realized this, as funny as it sounds. But I was talking to my now wife. She's very intelligent, very into higher consciousness thing, life coach. And I was just telling her, I couldn't figure out why. And we got deep. And I'm like, you know what? She's like, that was a theory. I'm like, I think it's exactly what happened. And they took me in, treating me like I was, their son-in-law from day one. Always listen to me, listen to my opinions. Just show me love. And I literally never sat down in my entire life with my father and just had a conversation. It was always him telling me what to do. And my father-in-law was one of the most intelligent men I ever knew in my life. And he would sit there and listen to me speak and just treat me with the utmost respect. I knew he was 100 times smarter than me, but you would never know it if you overheard a conversation. And, it was a relationship of respect and love. And that's why I stayed with her. So I was able to answer that question finally. But, the low point, I guess, was I got injured at work September 22nd of 2020. We were helping a 500-pound woman up the stairs. We get to the top of the stairs. The rookie's pulling her up. I have to lift her right leg up. And the last step, I put her right leg on the top step, and I see a foot starts slipping backwards. And I just crouched down and just kind of blasted her up the stairs. When I did, it herniated 4 discs and ended up needing surgery about 6 months later. I fixed some issues, but I needed a spinal fusion the following year. So this is April of 22. I was medically retired in October of 22. This is about 2 years to the day I got hurt. And then I had to go one more year for a workers' comp case. So 3 years of no work, no volunteering, wasn't allowed to go to the gym. I built one in my house, but essentially wasn't allowed to do anything. Was a man without a purpose. And idle hands are the devil's work, man. I just started thinking. And it's funny, as I was retiring, I'm like, man, I'm lucky I got out unscathed. I thought everything was good. But I don't know, calls and just feelings were popping up. I was getting angry. I was getting depressed. I was having rage issues. I'd say a cross word to my wife here and there, which she's the greatest woman in the world. Every time I do it, I'm like, what are you doing, asshole? And it was nothing crazy. It wasn't like we were getting crazy fights, but I'd just be rude. And there was no reason for it. I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then I sat down and watched a Sean Ryan podcast episode in spring of 23. He's interviewing a man named Eddie Penny, former Navy SEAL, Team 6 guy. And he was just recounting a story of the Extortion 17 incident in which a Chinook was shot down in Afghanistan, killing all 38 aboard, including 17 SEALs. It was the largest loss of community ever. And included in the dead was Jason Workman, his best friend. And as Eddie told the story of escorting Jason's body back to Utah, his hometown, and then finally to Arlington National Cemetery, he was crying, rightly so. He was very upset. And I simultaneously began thinking about a call I had had 5 years before about a 2-year-old found floating in a pool. I buried that call. It was actually the one call in my 30-year career I started crying. And I told myself, like, you fucking pussy, you can't cry. I just stopped myself immediately. It would have been the best thing I could have done, but we don't cry, man. And as I'm thinking about this, I just burst out. I'm just crying like a baby. I had no idea. I'm like, what is going on, man? And kind of put 2 and 2 together really quick. Realized that the feelings I'd been going through those past about a year at that point were some sort of PTSD from my job. And I always mistakenly thought the PTSD was only caused by seeing your brother or sister next to you get killed. But mine, again, was caused by being inside those most devastating, intimate moments of other people's lives. And I knew I needed help. Wasn't sure how I was going to do it. I didn't want to be this ornery guy that hated everyone and everything. You and I both seen it over and over. And I started really kind of researching modalities of healing. I had heard these special force operators coming back from war, self-professed broken men, and their consequent healing journeys with psychedelics. But I kind of dismissed it. And I thought it was like, foo-foo. It's not for me. And now I started paying attention. And I was watching podcasts. I was researching. It finally came to the realization that ayahuasca just felt calling me. So myself and my wife went to a facility called Soul Quest Ayahuasca Church in Orlando, Florida, March 1st of 2024. And we sat for 3 journeys over the course of a weekend. And my life was forever changed, literally after the first ceremony. And as I was coming out of it, and let me preface it by saying I had 2 former coworkers and friends from Suffolk County PD that had committed suicide 3 weeks before. The sergeant actually killed himself in a precinct locker room. And the universe told me, you are healed. Now, obviously, I'm not this healed human. You go through stuff every day, but essentially your PTSD is healed. Your life's purpose is to go forth and help other first responders and vets heal theirs. And I literally said, okay, out loud. Wasn't sure how I was going to do it. But one thing I decided to do is start my podcast, and we'll get into this. But essentially, over the course of that weekend, I changed my entire life.
I've had, numerous people on here have done all kinds of journeys from ibogaine to ayahuasca to MDMA, ketamine. I mean, this is a thing. There's so many tools in the toolbox that people don't realize are available to them. And this is where I think, the hope is. A lot of them, though, they reframe the way that they saw certain things. Some of them, if there was an addiction, obviously ibogaine, they literally walked out not wanting opioids, not wanting alcohol anymore. What were some of the kind of areas of enlightenment or boxes that were hidden away that were opened through these journeys that you experienced?
Yeah, so just like you said, I tell people that the medicine lets you see things that you've always seen in a different perspective. It lets you see things that you've never seen or noticed, and it just kind of breaks down the walls that have been surrounding you. So I literally, when it started, the medicine kicked in, I don't know, 40 minutes or so after we drank. And ayahuasca is essentially served in like a shot glass. You drink it, and it's just made. It's 2 vines that are found in the Amazon, and they're essentially boiled together. You just boil them, keep boiling them down, and you get that finished product. You filter out the impurities, and you're drinking it. So I started feeling the effects about 40 minutes in. The ground started moving. I started seeing the most bright, dynamic, vivid colors of my life. Started seeing geometric patterns in the sky. And I remember I had my arms out wide, and I was just saying, please, I need help. You have to help me get rid of this rage, this anger. I was crying. My journey was almost as though I was looking at a big screen TV, and most people say they sense a female presence. I did the same. They call her Mother Ayahuasca. And Mother was in like the left-hand corner of my screen. And I'm like, Mother, I need help. I can't get rid of this rage, this anger, this hatred. And it was nuts. It was as though every time I asked for something, it was requested, and it was like just a weight lifted off my shoulder. I remember in one part of the journey, she was bringing my dad to me, and it was like this big buildup. The music that had been playing in the ceremony area was like building and building, and it finally hit this crescendo. And the funny thing was, in reality, just the same volume, nothing changed. And then all of a sudden it stopped. In reality, it was still going on, and I'm waiting, and finally I know he's not going to show. And I just threw my hands in the air. I remember saying out loud, I'm like, fucking coward. I knew he wouldn't show. He couldn't talk about emotion. But it was nuts. It was as though, at the time, I think I was 54, 55. It was as though all of the emotional charge of all of our memories was just gone. Like I was thinking of things between he and I, and there was nothing attached to it. Like instantaneously, it was nuts. I remember also I was watching the volunteers work, and they're there for anything that we need. And I'm like, I want to be more like these people. They're so loving and gracious. Like, look at them. And most of them aren't big. And I remember thinking, like, I always equated being strong with like physical stature and physical strength and fighting ability and, shooting ability, whatever the case may be. And maybe there's a place for that in our respective profession. But I'm like, that's not strength, man. This is fucking strength. What they're doing takes strength. And I remember saying, like, I want to be a more loving man. I want to be more sympathetic, more empathetic. And like, I felt like I was becoming that, like, instantly. I'm trying to think what else I was asking for, but I was just telling her, like, I want to be more like these people. I just want to be a loving man. I want to be a good man. I want to be a good husband. And I don't know, everything I was asked for was like being granted immediately. And I just felt like my soul changing. I can't describe it. And at that conclusion, at 4 hours, like I knew, I just felt like I was reborn in a non-religious sense. And I don't know, I can't describe, like there was so much joy, in one respect, I'm like waiting for the balloon to pop. and it's all going to go back to the way it was. And the other, I'm like, man, it just changed my life for 4 hours. It was the most powerful cathartic thing like I've ever been through in my entire life.
One of the, I think, misconceptions about a lot of these therapies is like the magic bullet. Like you just go through and you do it and now everything's going to be great. You're living a Disney movie the rest of your life. One of the truths that emerged is that it seems like, again, this has given you the ability to open the closet door, but then now you have to go through, sift through all the boxes and start unpacking things. What have you started using as far as the tools after these experiences to continue your healing journey?
Yeah, so it's a great point that the medicine allows you to heal, but it is not, number one, it's not magic. And number two, you're never healed. You're always going through trauma. But the biggest thing that allowed me to do is become vulnerable. Like just now, first of all, I never would have been able to cry prior to this. And if I did, I'd be so embarrassed. But now I'm frankly proud of it. And it allowed me to have conversations like this with other men and, talk about their most intimate feelings. And anything I say, like I used to feel so weak talking about anything that had to do with emotion. Now I talk about any and everything. And, I think I have the ability to allow others to open up to me. Like, I'm told all the time by guys, like, bro, I never tell this to anyone. I can't believe what I'm telling you. I'm like, hey, bro, there's no judgment, man. I'm like, I've been through no one's been through everything, but you can't tell me something that's going to shock me. And we all think that we're alone and we don't feel these things, when in fact we all feel whatever we're describing. It's one of the biggest things about this PTSD is everyone thinks they're alone. And, I could turn to cops right now. You could turn to firemen right now. I could turn to firemen right now. You can turn to cops. We describe what we're feeling. And if these guys allow themselves to open up, you're going to see hands raised like, hey, James, I feel the same exact way, man. I thought I was the only one. Like there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of us going through it. It just doesn't have to be first responders or vets, civilians. You don't have to be in these quote unquote warrior cultures to have experienced trauma. Everyone experiences it. But now the greatest gift it's given me is the ability to become vulnerable and just talk and, allow others to see and feel like my deepest emotions. I've been going through it like the past couple of weeks, been down a little bit, and I made a couple of reels about it. But when I have guys check up on me, it's not, I'm good, bro. It's like, I'm kind of going through it, man. And imposter syndrome hit again. And my mom passed just about a year and a half ago. We were estranged like the last month of her life, and I didn't really process that. Or when I did last year, it was processed with anger. So I'm kind of sitting with that now, going through those feelings. And, it's weird. Like I felt unloved, to be frank. And saying that I never would have said it out loud, but I would have felt like such a weakling if I had allowed myself to say it. And now, I talk about it openly. Like this is how I'm feeling. And there are plenty of other guys that feel the same way. They're just afraid to say it as well. So, I talk about my feelings in hopes that it resonates with them and they're able to raise their hand. Exactly what happened with me and Eddie Penny. Like I know now subconsciously this warrior is crying and it gave me permission to do so. So everything I do is kind of geared towards men and women who are going through it now in the hopes that I can give them permission to do so and raise their hand and ask for help. Or my guests, if they hear their stories, it resonates with them and they identify with them and realize, Zach Ferguson was my third guest. And we both cried on the episode. We got done recording. I'm like, brother, that was beautiful. Someone's going to see a Navy SEAL crying just like me and think, man, if he could cry, I could fucking cry too. That's not weakness. It's actually strength. And it is. It's a sign of absolute strength. Raising your hand, ask for help, acknowledging feelings, talking about feelings, being tatted up and all this other bullshit and knowing how to shoot it. That's not strength. It's totally, totally different. It's, we equate, like I used to do, like physical stature and all that shit with strength. No, being able to talk and help people is a sign of that's strength.
I've used this analogy a lot recently. When you look at what a healthy human being is, it's the yin and the yang. And if you look at what brought us into uniform, it is the soft feminine side. It's compassion, it's empathy, it's kindness, it's service that drives us into uniform. Now, if you're going into a school shooting or I'm going into a structure fire, yeah, that's then when we need I think it's the yang, the hard masculine side for us to get in that flow state where we're not thinking about emotions, we're just doing the job. But then after is when you need to lean back into that other side, showing yourself compassion, your team, whoever it is. And as you alluded to, the kind of fake machismo that we were raised on with the Schwarzeneggers and the Stallones as supposedly the epitome of masculinity, or fucking John Wayne, which I never understood what the people thought he was a, manly man. But anyway,
I just saw him the other night in the movie, said the same thing.
But yeah, and that's how you end up with the tattoos and the shape. That's the epitome of the, the salty firefighter or the hard-nosed cop. But that's the white circle. You've removed any of the yang at this point. So I always get those two confused. I should really have it on my wall so I can get it right. But the soft.
My wife was talking about last night. Supposedly it's yang. I think it's yang. It's not. She's like, it's not yang. She's studying for a yoga certification, and they were talking about it in depth. So I have to look it up myself because I'm like, I've been saying yang my whole life.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's the problem, is that you get this facade of masculinity, not real masculine. A real man, as you said, can be dangerous when they need to be and kind and compassionate when they need to be. And that includes the team room or the fire station. Exactly. So the danger we have is now you think that you're this white circle and then you transition out the other side and you lose your identity and no one gives a shit in public that you were a cop or a firefighter anymore. And then, that becomes horrendous. But just as you've said, and this is why I've got over 1,100 guests now, many Navy SEALs, SAS, Delta, etc., who have been courageously vulnerable on this podcast. That's what makes them a man. Yes, their skill set obviously is something to be revered, but the fact that they were brave enough to put it all out there, and you and I spoke about the other day, anyone listening can't go, oh, that guy's just being a pussy because he's a SEAL Team 6 guy or a Delta or SAS. Like, no, that you don't get to call those guys a pussy. They are, when it comes to courage on the battlefield, they are the tip of the spear, truly. So if they can be courageously vulnerable and you're a firefighter or a cop or a plumber or a teacher, stop thinking that this facade of being a tough guy. Understand that real masculinity, real courage is this vulnerability that we're talking about.
Yeah, 100%. I actually went for training with GBRS group last year, and DJ Shipley and I got into a pretty deep conversation at the end of one of the days. And DJ's gone through Ibogaine healing journey. And we were talking about how, respectively, each of us didn't feel anything. And, I was like, DJ, no matter what uniform we put on, we're a human being first. And what the fuck is the point of living if you feel nothing? Like, life is beautiful, but we're going through it and not feeling like shit. We're deflecting everything off of us, man. We're trying to keep the pain at bay, but then we keep everything at bay, including our loved ones. And, his big thing was like, he was yelling at his daughters and wife and kind of couldn't help himself. And that's what his father did to him. And, he was seeing himself exactly the way his father was treating him as a kid. And he's like, I didn't want that. I realized like that I do not want that for my kids. I don't want to be that man. And, it is, you could be a warrior, but there is a lot more to a man than just, being capable in that field. What else are you going to do? How are you going to raise children? What kind of husband are you going to be? What kind of friend are you going to be? Yeah, you're a tough guy, but that's all you have to provide to the world. Well, it's not going to get you too far, man. And, this vulnerability is it's getting maybe easier for guys to express, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to get guys to open up, because we are emotionally not intelligent a lot of the times.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you mentioned that you had, a darker time the last couple of weeks. I've had the exact same thing, timeline wise. And, I know exactly what it is. There's family health issues and, financial issues. And it's just been one of those shit storms. But when people have reached out and said, hey, you seem like you're not doing so well, I'm like, no, you're right. I'm not. Because that's what you can do. Like, before it all builds up to where you're now at crisis, you can be like, no, it's been a really shit couple of weeks. I'll be honest. It was this and this and this. And, on one hand, I'm really fucking angry about a bunch of stuff. On the other hand, I'm, somewhat depressed. But because I've been in and out of these dark places before, and it's not the darkest of places, but, navigated it.
Yeah.
It's like, but I know, I'm leaning into the things that I know that work, and I know that it's going to get better. And literally 2 days ago, I woke up and I was like, oh, sweet, I feel better. Now is it again going to be Disney? No, there's a lot of work ahead of me to mitigate these things, and hoping that some of the health issues will be better for my family member. But when you can identify it, you can be vulnerable and honest at the beginning of a struggle, so then you don't get that crushing weight. And I think I literally observed this just 2 days ago. That's really important when you can look at someone and go, yeah, no, I'm not doing well at all. No, I'm really worried about this. It's got me pretty fucking down. Everything's kind of feeling a bit gray at the moment. Then immediately you're offloading it before it really starts building up. And I think that's a sign of growth, post-traumatic growth, that you can be that honest, that nothing is ever really allowed to pile up, because right at the very beginning, you're like, yeah, this has been a shit week.
Yeah, and kudos to you for admitting it. I feel the same. Like, I actually went to my wife the other day, and I'm like, I'm going through it, and I never would have been able to do that, a year and a half ago. Even though we're close as could be, and we have great communication, I still wouldn't allow myself to be that vulnerable. And 3 friends over the past few days reached out, and I was honest with them. When in fact, in the past, we were like, I'm good, bro. How about you? And just right off to something else. Mm-hmm. But we can't do that. I mean, you can do anything you want, but if you do it, you're not processing, what's going on. You're not being honest with yourself. I feel like I'm a hypocrite as well. Going on social media, I'm telling guys and girls how to kind of deal with their problems, and I'm not doing the same thing for myself, or I'm being dishonest when my, good friends are asking me. No, I mean, if they're good friends, that's what they're there for. And consequently, same thing when I ask them and they tell me they're not doing well. All right, let's get on a call, or, whatever the case may be, and talk you through this. And it's a human experience, man. It's I think one of the best dialogues I ever heard speech-wise was Sylvester Stallone and Rocky Balboa, when he's talking to his son about nothing hitting harder than life and not being able to duck those punches. I don't care how good looking you are, how rich you are, how bad you are, how funny you are. Like, no one is ducking life, and life is traumatic at times. It's a beautiful thing, but it ebbs and flows, man. And when those dark times hit, have a system in place to kind of get yourself out of them quicker. Feel the feelings. The only way out is through. Don't deflect them. Don't dull them with substances. You have to feel it. But when you do, you're able to heal it.
I think one of the areas that is so exciting that I've heard, in this echo chamber that I'm in for 9 years now, but I feel needs to be front and center in the mental health conversation, aside from the feeling of burdensome as far as a red flag. I've said this so many times on here and written about it, that, if you truly believe that you're a burden to the people that you love, that is your fucking sign to ask for help, because that's your mind slowly being twisted by that point. But from a hope point of view, rather than talking about stigma, because I would argue a stigma is like a 10 years ago conversation now, it's the hope of post-traumatic growth. And hearing so many people that are on the other end of this crucible they've been through, and like you said, not done healing, but been through their healing journey for the majority of what they were struggling with, that, in this case, Mike 2.0 is a healthier, happier, more resilient version of his former self before he went through. So talk to me about that. For all the people that are scared to look in the mirror, to begin this healing journey, what is exciting about the other side? Because I think that's it. That post-traumatic growth conversation should be what we're talking about now.
Yeah. I mean, I think the number one thing is, what do you see looking back at you when you look in that mirror? And sometimes it's tough to do so. I remember a few years ago, my buddy committed suicide, and I was so sad, but I couldn't cry. And I remember getting out of the shower and I'm looking in the mirror. I'm like, man, you are broken. Like, one of your best friends committed suicide, you can't cry. So as far as, now I just have I guess a different perspective on life. And number one, I know there's a lot more going on in his life than we have any clue about. I don't know. They talk about dimensions and, I mean, there's so many theories that people believe in, but I truly believe that there is so much more. I believe that there is no coincidence. Everything happens for a reason. I believe that you're put through things to learn lessons. I believe that you cannot ever make yourself a victim. Never, ever. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. When you're going through it, look for the lessons that can be learned. And maybe you're not going to see them for a long time. When that poor 2-year-old was drowning in the pool, I had no idea why I was there. But I now know that I was put in that situation for a reason because of what I'm doing now. I actually reestablished contact with a family, wrote a 4-page letter about last year after I got on the ayahuasca journey. And because her name is Dana Sikorsky, she survived and she was brought home. She was supposed to be bedridden her whole life. She suffered a hypoxic brain injury. Doctors were not expecting much. Actually, they expected her to pass away before she had 3. And she has far surpassed what anyone thought. But her family was so gracious with the fire department, and they were so glad, overwhelmed with having Dana back at the house, that they didn't care, that she was suffering from, the condition that she was kind of in at the time. And they kept inviting me to visit through the fire chief. And I had the weirdest mix of dynamics, man. I was feeling guilty for saving her because I was like, if she was already dead, why did we resuscitate her if she's only going to be in this condition? Then I felt guilty for having that feeling, that guilt. So things just kind of multiplied, and I never visited. Ended up going in there one time, and I saw her. She wasn't really tracking me when I went in. She couldn't really make eye contact, and my eyes started welling up with tears. And there was radio traffic on the radio. It wasn't anything. It wasn't even a call, but I pretended it was. I was like 220 copy. I'm like, guys, I got to go. And I split. Never came back again. And, I apologized. I told him exactly everything I had gone through. And I said, I now know that I was supposed to be your house. It was supposed to be me because of my purpose now the rest of my life. Like, your daughter is going to be saving people's lives through me. I'm like, she and I were both supposed to be there. And I said, that is one of her purposes in life. So, they were overwhelmed. And, now I just look for the good in everything, when I used to be the total opposite. I used to be the pessimist. Everything was shady. Now everything is good. And, if it happens to turn out not that way, oh, well. I just look for the positive. I try to, I change the way I handle relationships. I tell my buddies I love them. I don't know. I just appreciate life more, I guess, is the biggest thing. Sometimes we go through and we have our trials and tribulations, but you don't take stock in what you actually have. You're always thinking about what you don't have, what you didn't do, what you failed at. When in fact, you need to take time and think about everything you succeeded at doing. The fact that you woke up today, the fact that you woke up today feeling healthy, look at everything you have, everything that allows you to contribute to society, to help others. I mean, I go on and on, but life is beautiful. And if you're not feeling that way, I promise you that you can once again. You just have to raise your hand and ask for that help. And it's there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's impossible to be in a state of gratitude and also depressed or anxious. But I mean, it's getting to there again, because it is. I mean, it is a beautiful life, and not to open that rabbit hole again. But when people get drawn into politics and these other things, and they phrase America as the people in the blue ties or the red ties, that they're missing the point. Like, this experience that we have, and the nature that's outside your window. I mean, that's what this is about, and there is so much to be grateful for. You open your eyes in the morning. That's a win. How many thousands of people don't get to do that? So I couldn't agree more.
Oh, yeah. Because I put a story up yesterday. It was a guy with no legs. His arms weren't really functioning, and it was showing, I guess, his friend picking him up from the ground, putting him in the wheelchair. And actually, I started crying. And I'm like, you're kind of going through it right now because of certain thing that I didn't succeed at or don't have. And this poor guy, this is his situation 24/7. And, you're always told not to compare yourselves. And I don't think comparing yourselves to maybe people who are above you is necessarily healthy, what, they have, what you don't have, this and that. But I think it benefits you periodically to kind of look at people who are suffering and who are going through tough lives. And then when you contrast it with yours and how good you actually have it, sometimes it snaps you out of it and lets you really appreciate it. We all go through bad. First of all, if you don't go through bad, how are you going to appreciate the good? It's never going to happen. You just be this spoiled, petulant child your entire life. It's a yin and yang. You have to have good and bad, and you appreciate first of all, there's a lot more good than bad, I promise. And you appreciate it a lot more when you kind of go through that bad. It's a necessary evil.
Absolutely.
Not even evil, it's necessary.
Yin and yang.
Yeah. I don't know how many cases I have to say that for 57 years the same way.
All right. Well, for people listening, I'm sure they've been incredibly moved by this conversation. I'm sure they'd love to listen to your podcast, follow you. Where are the best places to find all things Mike online?
Yeah. So my Instagram is The Resilient Warrior 5778. And if you want to catch the podcast, that is The Resilient Warrior Nation on YouTube. And we're about to put it on all the audio only platforms. I don't know why I don't have it on there. I didn't realize how many people listen to audio-only podcasts. I mean, I have to visually see it.
Brilliant, mate. Well, I want to thank you so much for, not only just the conversations that we've had, but I always say this, when people are vulnerable on here, when they do bare their soul and, sometimes revisiting some of these calls, it pulls the scab off the wound a little bit, but I know how deeply it's going to resonate and how many people it's going to help. So I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And again, my honor being on. Love being here. Love what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. I can't imagine how many lives you've affected. 1,000 guests. It's incredible. So keep doing what you're doing. You're on a mission, man. Noble.